2025-26 college basketball season is officially here now that the AP preseason poll is finally out.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Andy Patton, and you are joining at the place to get your college basketball content Monday through Friday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank all of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Give a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. Remind you all that you can check out the show ad-free on Amazon Music, and that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, folks, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Well, the AP poll is out. I have some thoughts on some teams that I think are a little too high, some thoughts on some teams that are maybe a little bit too low. We're going to talk about that in the first segment, and then we are going to do another team preview episode in the second and third segment. It's going to be joined by a special guest to talk Villanova hoops and how things might look in the first year of the Kevin Willard era. But we'll start. The AP poll is out again. You can find the AP poll pretty much anywhere on the internet. It has been all over the place. The top 5 teams, not much of a surprise here. Purdue, Houston are 1 and 2. Florida, the defending champs, at number 3. UConn is at number 4. And then Rick Pitino and the Johnnies are at number 5. 6 through 10, you got Duke, Michigan, BYU, Kentucky, and Texas Tech. If you listened to Monday's episode with Isaac and I, you know that we did our top 25 rankings coming into the season and kind of where we had players or teams in the preseason poll. So what I did here is just looked at what teams did I have 4 or more spots different than the AP poll. Which teams was I higher on? Which teams was I lower on? And then which teams did I rank that the AP poll didn't rank, and vice versa? And honestly, there wasn't a ton of major discrepancies between my rankings, between Isaac's rankings, and between the AP poll. It felt like there was a fair amount of continuity, which is a bit surprising in the modern era of college basketball, where some of these rosters are completely new or nearly completely new. And so you wouldn't expect there to be quite as much consensus from the AP poll voters as there ended up being here in this conversation. The 3 teams that I was higher on than the AP poll: Kentucky, who I had 5 spots higher. The AP poll had them 9th. I had them 4th. Illinois, who the AP poll had 17th, who I had 12th. And then Gonzaga, who the AP poll had 21st, who I had 15th. We'll start with those 3 teams. Kentucky, again, I kind of understand it. It's a very new look roster, not a ton of continuity for them, but they do bring back Otega Owe, who was just voted as the preseason SEC Player of the Year, and for good reason. That is his award to lose this upcoming season. They also just are so deep. To me, it's really hard to not have this Kentucky team in the top 5 because I'm a believer in Mark Pope. And I think we saw that bear out last year with how successful this team was, how many marquee non-conference games they were able to win, and how well they did in conference play with virtually no continuity. This year, they do have more continuity with some of those returners. They have a nice balance of high-level incoming freshmen and transfer portal studs. And they're deep all the way through 12, 13, 14 players deep on this roster. I don't think you should be judging teams based on how good their 9th, 10th, 11th guy is necessarily, but there is not a deeper team in college basketball than Kentucky. They are so good, top to bottom, and I'm a believer in Mark Pope enough that I think this is going to be one of the 5 best teams in college hoops. Illinois, to me, the difference between 12 and 17 and 15 and 21, for that matter, is pretty minimal. So I don't actually feel like there's a huge discrepancy between how I feel about Illinois and Gonzaga and how the AP poll does. For Illinois, I talked about this a bit on Monday's show. I think Coach Underwood is really good at getting the most out of his players offensively, and I think this team has so much talent. And yes, there's a lot of new players. There's some freshmen coming in like Petrovic and others who are coming over internationally. They have some transfers coming in like Andrei Stojakovic. I know the injury for him is a big question mark for this team at this point, as he's expected to be one of the best players on the team and maybe one of the best scorers in the entire Big Ten Conference. You have the Ivasic brothers, Timislav and Zvonimir up front. I think this roster is very, very good, and I give them a bump up 5 spots ahead of the AP poll, in part because I think Underwood is the right coach to get this team humming along early in the season. And if they can get healthy, this team could be very, very dangerous. Gonzaga is probably the toughest team in the top 25 to figure out exactly what to do with, because it's here August 13th as I'm recording this, and we still don't know the status of Tyon Grant-Foster, their transfer portal addition from Grand Canyon, former WAC Player of the Year, 20-point per game scorer for the Grand Canyon Lopes, formerly at Kansas and DePaul as well. And he committed to Gonzaga in late May, but has not gotten a waiver approved to be eligible this season. He does have a practice waiver, so he is with the team right now, but has not been granted an official waiver. Whether he is eligible or not does make a pretty big impact on this team. He's a versatile wing who's a good scorer, who takes some gravity away from Graham Ike and Braden Huff on the block. He is also a good defensive wing as well, averaged over 1.5 steals and blocks per game each of the last 2 years at Grand Canyon. So his impact is significant for Gonzaga. But beyond that, this is a team that only has 4 returning players who were in the rotation last year. And that's Graham Ike, Braden Huff, as well as reserves Emmanuel Inocente and Ismaila Diani. Now they have some guys coming in who were redshirts last year. Braden Smith, transfer from Colgate, Patriot League Player of the Year, redshirted last year behind Ryan Nemhard. Jalen Worley spent 3 years at Florida State, transferred to Gonzaga from Virginia after Tony Bennett retired. Steele Venters missed the last 2 years with injuries. So those guys have been in the program, have been in the system. So I think that the timing of getting everybody kind of acclimated to this system isn't going to take as long, because while there's only 4 returners, there's guys who are familiar with this system. I also think freshman Mario Saint-Superi from Spain is going to be great. He's going to be very, very good. It may take him a little bit of time, but he has really high upside. So I'm a little higher on this team than everybody else. In terms of lower on, it's honestly a lot of the same teams we talked about on Monday's show. St. John's, they come in at number 5. I had the number 11 on my rankings. I know that's lower than most people, but I am concerned about the guard play. They said Ian Jackson's going to be the point guard. Then Rick Pitino said, I don't believe in point guards. Then now they're saying it might be Isaiah Sellers as the point guard. Maybe Dylan Darling steps into that role. I'm a little bit hesitant about that. Having said that, I love this team's front court. Zubi Ejiofor is one of my favorite players in college basketball. Dylan Mitchell and Bryce Hopkins could be really good connecting fours for this team. They have a lot more floor spacing with Sonone and Sellers and Darling on this team. I think that the talent is really there. I'm just a little bit skeptical on the fit. Arizona, the AP poll has them 13th. I have them 17th. That's a really minor difference, and I talked about it again. Just Tommy Lloyd's unwillingness to play freshmen and how that might impact this roster. Arkansas, I have them 19th. The AP poll has them 14th. Again, it's more about some concern about the depth in the front court, and also just John Calipari using his players the correct way coming into the season. And then Auburn. Auburn was 20th in the AP poll. I had them 25th. They were my biggest faller after the Bruce Pearl retirement and his son, Stephen Pearl, taking over. I actually thought Auburn would be a little higher. It seems like more AP voters knocked them down than maybe I thought were going to do so, as they fell to 20th, where I think they were projected to be closer to 15 or so. So there were some AP voters who were similarly concerned about Stephen Pearl taking over for Bruce Pearl. I still think on paper this roster is way too talented to not be in the top 25. And to not spend a lot of time this year in the top 25, but there is a justified skepticism about this team's ceiling now that their head coach and future Hall of Famer is no longer in that role with the program. Last but not least here, a couple teams that I ranked that were not ranked in the AP poll were San Diego State and NC State. I had San Diego State 21st. They received 74 votes, which was the 3rd most among non-top 25 teams. NC State, I had 23rd. They received 101 votes, which was the most among not ranked teams. So again, very close to being ranked for both those teams. Similarly, the 2 teams that I did not rank who were ranked are Michigan State, who came in at 22, and North Carolina, who came in at 25. Well, folks, Villanova was not in the top 25, nor should they have been in the top 25, but Kevin Willard's going to look to get this team into that top 25 and into that national conversation. Can he do it? We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, folks, the holidays are going to be here before you know it, which is exciting, but getting your home ready for guests and celebrations, well, it can feel like a lot. And maybe your serverware needs a refresh. Maybe your guest room could use some new bedding. And Wayfair, they have everything that you need to get your home holiday ready. From Christmas trees and wreaths to bedding, cookware, and outdoor inflatables, it is your one-stop shop for every room in the house. Wayfair makes it easy to personalize your home for the holidays with a huge selection for every style and budget. And with free and easy delivery, even on the big stuff, you can get everything you need without the hassle of huge delivery fees. We just started planning what our holiday decor is going to be for this upcoming season to add just the right touches to our house. And you better believe that we're looking at Wayfair for every single part of it. Now, instead of stressing about getting the house ready, you can actually enjoy the holidays with your friends and family. So get organized, refreshed, and ready for the holidays for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. Wayfair, every style, every home. Folks, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you'll get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And when you use FanDuel, whether it's parlays, player props, even jumping in on the action live, it makes watching football even more exciting since you've got a little bit riding on that action. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving deep into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. Since we're about to talk Villanova hoops, the Wildcats plus 3,000 to win the Big East. Tough odds with UConn St. John's in the mix. They're also plus 10,000 to win it all. But if you are a big-time believer in Coach Kevin Willard's club, what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com now to download the FanDuel app and get started today. All right, folks, thrilled now to be joined by Michael DeRosa, a writer over at Road to the Garden, covering the Big East, and he's here to talk with me about Villanova hoops. Michael, we're going to start talking about the Kyle Neptune era, which unfortunately did not go the way that Villanova fans were hoping. It is hard to replace a legend. The number of coaches who have failed or struggled after replacing somebody as iconic as Jay Wright is numerous, but Neptune never quite got it done for this team. He's out the door. They bring in Coach Kevin Willard, obviously has a track record of success. The way that he came in was a bit messy, coming in during the Sweet 16, right before Maryland played their next game. It certainly didn't make a lot of friends for him out in College Station on his way out the door, but ultimately, Kevin Willard is a proven coach. He's a winner. He's somebody who has succeeded at this level. Got to feel pretty good if you're Villanova coming off of those three pretty ugly seasons in the Coach Neptune era.
100%. He probably doesn't have the same high ceiling that, Jay Wright did, which was winning national titles. We haven't seen Willard teams make deep runs in the tournament until last year, which was met with all that chaos, as you mentioned, but he's a proven winner at this level. He won at Maryland. He won at Seton Hall, won Big East titles. So you have to be very happy where maybe it's not the home run you were looking for, and maybe you were looking for a big name that could immediately get you to a national title, but you got a guy who's going to win basketball games and make the team, like, put them back in where they should be in consistent tournament territory.
And he goes out and has, again, in this era, especially, when you take over as a new program, the first thing you have to do is basically build a roster from scratch. You didn't used to have to do that. And now, we see with Pat Kelsey has an entirely new roster at Louisville in his first year, Mark Pope at Kentucky. And some coaches are able to turn that into immediate success, and some are not as much. But for this team, like, we have a couple of returners, really only one of note, in Tyler Perkins, who averaged about 6 points, 4 boards last year, a good player and certainly somebody who's going to step into a bigger role. But then you go out and just get a ton of talent in the transfer portal. Bryce Lindsey from James Madison's a big one. Duke Brennan, a big man from Grand Canyon. Zion Stanford from Temple. We know that Devin Askew is going to be out for a while. Sounds like at least January for him. The transfer from Long Beach State, who made stops at like 6 other schools prior to ending up at Villanova. But what do you make of this transfer portal class in particular for Villanova, and how capable this group is of competing right away in the Big East?
Yeah, it was thrown together pretty quickly. They went after Rodney Rice pretty hard, who was from Willard at Maryland, and they didn't end up getting him. So you could tell, like, this was definitely like plan B after Rice being like plan A, and like just building around him. And I think Lindsey was a guy I really thought was going to be like an under the radar pickup. Seemingly everyone else was on the same page that he's just quite good. He was recruited by Buzz Williams at Texas A&M, redshirted that year, but like Buzz Williams doesn't bring kids in who aren't tough. Like that's just how he works. He's bringing in kids who are tough. And Lindsey shot 40% from 3 at JMU. He had a pretty good season there. That I think he's a guy that it might take him a little bit of time to fully evolve into that version of him, but I think he could be quite good. Duke Brennan coming over from the WAC, Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon's been a very successful program just because, I mean, they have that size, that athleticism in that league. As you know, as a Gonzaga fan, you know where their best player is, and you know how optimistic people are for him. So where I think Brennan might struggle just because I mean, it's a big jump and he wasn't like a showstopper in the WAC, but at the same time, the bigs in this league aren't great. So he should have a chance to be another one of those like solid middle of the road bigs. And Zion Stanford's another pretty talented player. He's got skills. He's kind of a generalist, pretty good at everything, not like amazing in one area, but he should be like a solid rotational piece for a Big East team.
Looking at the freshman class, the most notable name here by far is Acaden Lewis. Acaden Lewis is a guy that really just exploded onto the scene kind of in that summer circuit and all of a sudden was being recruited by the bluest of blue bloods. Obviously, Villanova ends up getting him, but I know Carolina was in the mix. Kentucky was in the mix. There's a lot of really great programs that were trying to bring him on campus. And he ends up staying at Villanova, 6'2" guard, only ended up 48th in the class, but a guy that has a ton of upside potentially coming into this program. I think I know that my co-host Isaac and I did our Big East preview a few weeks ago, and I think Acaden Lewis is the freshman of the year in this conference. I'm not sure he's the best freshman necessarily, but the combination of playing time and just opportunity for him, I think, is there over somebody like a Hudson Greer or an Eric Ryba or some of the other freshmen that are in this conference. To me, Acaden Lewis feels like maybe not the X factor for this team, but certainly a major X factor in terms of this team being somewhere like 7th in the Big East versus contending to be a top 4 team in the conference. Do you feel the same? Do you think Acaden Lewis is somebody who can be a big impactful player for this team right away?
100%. I think Acaden, if he like hits the ground running immediately, which like when he decommitted from Kentucky, the one reason was he wanted to play immediately. Like he's like, no, I'm ready. After he lit it up, as you mentioned over the summer with Team Durant, like he was the guy that just shot up recruiting boards from like mid 100s to like, yeah, no, this kid is far better than that. And he proved to be, he was. Electric score, lefty guard, hard to guard, really a ton of moves at really every level. He's able to score at all 3 levels of the floor. If he hits his ceiling and just hits the ground running immediately, this team, he will be the reason they end up overperforming. If Acaden Lewis is like pretty definitively their best player by even conference tournament time or by conference play, excuse me. I think that is the upside case for Villanova is really Acaden Lewis just being that guy.
The biggest question I have on this team by far is depth in the front court, because it's just seemingly not really there. Like we mentioned Duke Brennan, and I think even if Duke Brennan can make the leap to the Big East, which like you said, the front court depth in the Big East is not elite necessarily. He's still going to get bodied by Zuby Ejiofor and some of those guys. But like, even if he makes the leap and is a good quality or even above average starting big in the conference, where's the depth after him? I mean, there's not a lot of guys. They have a 7-foot freshman coming in, but he was unranked in the class, Nico Onyekwiri, and there's just not a ton of other size. Matthew Hodge, 6'8" forward who redshirted last year. But that to me feels like the big concern is there enough talent and even just bodies in the front court for this Villanova team to hang in a conference that, again, is maybe not super deep there, but it's a tough physical league. It always has been. And to me, I struggle to see how Villanova is going to compete with the depth they have in the front court.
Yeah, I could absolutely. I think there are definitely multiple downside cases for this team. I think that's one of them, in that Jafar Gapara was a guy they brought in June, I believe. It was pretty late in the offseason that they decided to bring him in, that Willard brought him over from Maryland. And Braden Pierce was another guy he brought over from Maryland who didn't really play much there. But I want to push back a little bit in that you mentioned Matthew Hodge. You mentioned how Acaden is your Big East freshman of the year. I think this is a hot take of mine. I think it's Hodge. I think Hodge is the best player on this team. Redshirted last year because of those he couldn't get his credits to transfer over.
Right,
I think he's really skilled. Willard's had success with this similar mold of player. I mean, obviously Mamu Kelishvili being the most prominent, but Hodge isn't going to be Mamu in year one, but forwards who can kind of do it all. Like, he's not the most athletic, but he's big, really skilled, really good jump shot, really good at the high post, good passer, can put the ball on the floor, can score with his back to the basket, really skilled offensive player. And from everything I heard with Villanova last season, he was really lighting it up in practice. He was one of their best guys. That it wouldn't surprise me if he just absolutely hits the ground running. I know there were other high major teams that, like, when Neptune ended up going, they were like, okay, if Hodge enters the portal, we're going to want him. But Willard, that was probably, to me, that was honestly his biggest recruitment, was keeping Matt Hodge. I think Hodge is going to be a very good player in this league, especially if you're able to keep him down the line. I think he'll be a key cog in this rebuild, obviously with the aforementioned Acaden Lewis and some of these other pieces.
Let's take a look at the projected starting lineup here. I have a feeling that Matt Hodge is going to be in your starting five, which that was my big question mark, is where they're going to go at the 4. Brennan, Hodge in the front court would be my guess. Obviously, with Askew being out, you still have a lot of guard options you could go to. Do you think Perkins steps into a starting role? Do you think Acaden Lewis starts right away? Is it Stanford? Is it Lindsay? Like, kind of, who do you kind of think is going to be the starting lineup for this team on day one and throughout the season?
Yeah. So Christian Jeffrey was a guy I was really high on coming out of the high school class when he was at Mount Zion in high school. And then he played with New Heights Lightning in AAU ball. And in the few games I watched of him, he played better than Malik Thomas, who was at Arkansas. Now, is he better than Malik Thomas? Obviously not. He's not. But, like, he's a guy I'm quite high on. But that to say, I do not think he starts. I think they go with Acaden, especially with the Askew injury. I think Askew probably would have started and been kind of like a bridge guy to some of these younger guys. Now you lose that in the early season. I think you're just going to throw the freshmen into the fire and see what they got. I'd go Acaden Lewis. I'd go at the 2. I would go Lindsay, 3 Perkins, and then Hodge. It's definitely a very young group, but you got to work it out. And then Brennan at the 5. That would be my starting 5 for them.
Well, talk about throwing this team in the fire. Their first game of the season is going to be one of the toughest games that they play in the non-conference slate. We're going to talk about what that schedule is going to look like for them, how they might do in the Big East in the first year of the Coach Willard era. All that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, college sports are back, and I could not be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy of the crowd, there's nothing like it. But let's be honest, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. And that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see, that's what you pay. And honestly, it's faster, it's cheaper, and it's less stressful than any other way that I've bought tickets. And I love that you can see the views from your seat right there in the app. We're about to talk about Villanova's first game of the season, the Hall of Fame series featuring Nova versus BYU and Florida versus Arizona in Las Vegas. Tickets are on sale at Game Time. You can get them for just $71 a piece. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying college tickets by using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, folks, still Andy Patton here, still joined by Michael DeRosa of Road to the Garden, still talking Villanova basketball here on our team preview episode. I think our 28th team preview of the season as we get closer and closer to the start of the actual games being played on November 3rd. And speaking of November 3rd, that is Villanova's first day of the season, first game of the season. It is against BYU. It'll be in Las Vegas as part of that Hall of Fame series. I'm really excited for this game. They do play a couple of good exhibition games before that. I always like when teams are willing to challenge themselves with those exhibition games, and they're playing VCU and they're playing at Virginia for those 2 exhibition games. And they got that game against BYU. Then the majority of their non-conference slate is good teams, good mid-major teams, not great teams necessarily. And then you get to the end and it's a gauntlet right before Big East play. They'll go in at Michigan, got to go take on the Wolverines on December 9th. They're hosting Pitt on December 13th, and then they're playing Wisconsin in Milwaukee to close out the non-conference. That is on December 19th. And Michael, I look at this schedule and I like the way it's put together, particularly for a team that is still having to come together and obviously has a lot of new faces, very little continuity, a few guys from Maryland that Kevin Willard's familiar with, but not a lot of players returning to this program. So to me, there's a lot of opportunities for growth in the non-conference slate, but you throw them right into the fire right away with that game against BYU, man. I cannot wait for that one on November 3rd.
Yeah, that one's going to be very fun. I mean, obviously our first look at a loaded BYU team is talked about a lot, but like you're throwing this pretty young Villanova team into the fire immediately. Like that's a BYU team that has top 10 aspirations with ease. So you're throwing them into the fire, and that game's out west too. That's going to be a very fun one. Yeah. KenPom, obviously we just, KenPom just dropped KenPom has that as a 80-75 loss for Villanova. I would expect that to be by more than 5 is what I would say about that. Yeah.
Mhm. I would think a 5-point loss would be a pretty good result for Villanova. I think you'd feel okay about that if you're the Wildcats in that one. But yeah, I like this end of this stretch here as well for them at Michigan. Obviously, that's going to be really brutally hard game. But what I like about it is by this point you'll have gotten your bearings a little bit.
Yep.
Like they'll probably still be without Askew at this point, but they'll be used to that. They'll be familiar with whether it's Lewis stepping into a starting role or Lindsay or whomever. They'll be more comfortable by that point. Does that mean they're going to go steal a W? And in Ann Arbor, probably not. That's going to be a really tough game, but it means they're going to be more prepared to beat Pitt at home, and maybe they could challenge Wisconsin in Milwaukee. That's also going to be a tough one. But what we know is even if they lose all 3 of those games or go 1-2, they're going to be a lot more prepared getting into conference play with that tough slate of games right before they get into that.
100%. Teams testing themselves at this point is so key. There are teams that will play this really cupcake schedule, and then you see them in that first game they play against another high-level team, and they just get punched in the mouth, and they just don't know how to respond to it. This team's going to learn how to do that, especially in that first game against BYU. And then you've got the games, as you mentioned before, against Queens, even talented mid-major teams like Duquesne. Old Dominion's usually all right. Temple's usually had a team. They've had some success against Villanova recently that you play those teams, you'll understand your role and how to win some of these closer games, what you have to do to win these close games. And you'll learn a lot from there. And then go into a Michigan, what it's like to play against a team that is so talented. And then maybe that can help you against a Pitt, a team that Pitt at home is a game they probably should win. And then test you in a road environment against Wisconsin. I mean, not directly a road game, but basically a road game that these young guys, you're throwing them into the fire and they're going to learn from that. And that should make them better come Big East play.
Well, I want to take a look at what I project to be the ceiling and the floor for this Villanova team and kind of hear whether you think that feels accurate, whether there's maybe a little bit higher ceiling or maybe a little bit lower floor for this team. Obviously, the Big East is going to be a challenge this season for anybody that's not named UConn or St. John's. I mean, they're 2 top 5 teams in the AP poll, 2 of the best teams in college basketball by pretty much every metric. And you have the Creighton and Creighton's ranked 23rd in the AP poll. Marquette has always been good under Shaka Smart. But to me, the ceiling for this Villanova team is that they are challenging a top 3 spot. I don't think the ceiling is that they're beating either UConn or St. John's in the regular season standings, but that after that group of Creighton, Marquette, Providence, Villanova, maybe even a few others are in that mix. And Villanova is squarely in that mix and contending to be 3rd or 4th in the league. They get a single-digit seed in March and they make a run of the Sweet 16. Everything has to go right for this to happen in my mind. That's Acaden Lewis being that guy. That is him being a true dominant, one of the best freshmen in all of college basketball. That is your mid-major guards stepping up in a major way. Bryce Lindsey, Zion Stanford, they prove that they can play well at this level. Tyler Perkins takes on a bigger leadership role. Duke Brennan ends up being one of the better bigs in the conference. All of that needs to happen, and probably more than just that. And you mentioned Matt Hodge earlier. If he really is this team's best player and a versatile 4, that's a really big bonus for them as well. Whereas the floor for this team, 7th, 8th, maybe in the Big East. They shouldn't finish lower than 8th. That would be a disaster. But I think that the floor is certainly outside of that top 5, maybe even 7th, 8th in there. And they missed the NCAA tournament. And that would be a big frustration for Nova fans, obviously, coming off the Kyle Neptune era where they were getting real uncomfortable with continuing to miss the tournament, bringing in a coach who's consistently gets his teams to the big dance to not be able to make it. But I think you would see a team that doesn't have enough depth in the front court. I think that would be a big question mark, even with Hodge and Brennan. I think there's still not enough depth behind them. The guys who are transferring up to the from the mid-major level just don't deliver in the way we're expecting them to. The depth in the backcourt takes the hit with Askew's injury. Maybe the freshmen aren't quite ready to go. And then you have another year where Villanova is not in the NCAA tournament. Those are kind of where I think the tent poles are for this program in terms of the best and worst case scenarios for them.
Man, I'm going to sound like a pessimist. I'm sorry, Villanova fans. I think the floor and ceiling are both lower than you had them. I'd say the floor just first, I'd say it's 9th just because maybe DePaul hits that upside case. Maybe Butler hits their upside case as well. And then you're just behind those teams because of that. That's what I would say is the floor. I think they should pretty definitively be better than Seton Hall and Xavier, just regardless to me. Those would be the 2 teams that I think they're pretty definitively better than. DePaul, I would say they're better than as well. But if DePaul hits their upside, I could see them just squeaking out, like barely being better than Nova. And then the ceiling, I think, is lower than you have it, just because I'm not sure if any of these guys are stars in the Big East yet. Acaden and Hodge, I think, both have the talent to be sometime down the line, but I don't know if they're there yet. And just because of that, I think they're going to be out-talented in some of these games, like particularly like early in season. BYU and Michigan, those are two of the top 12 teams in the country, just roughly, that I think they're going to be out-talented there. But even in this league, like UConn, St. John's are obviously like pretty substantially out-talenting them. But like even then, like I could make an argument that they're one of the lesser talented rosters. Like Providence has some dudes on that roster. If Chase Ross hits for Marquette, he's going to be the best player on the floor in that game by a pretty wide margin. Same with KJ Lewis, in my opinion, in the Georgetown game, that I think they might be at a talent deficit in terms of like stars. I think they have a whole bunch of guys that are ready to be like good third options at this point, but I don't think they have a guy who's ready to be the alpha. And maybe Acaden molds into that. Maybe Hodge molds into that, but I don't think they're there yet. And as a result of that, I'd say like the upside ceiling case is like you sneak into the tournament and maybe win a game. And like it's a 50-50 coin flip, and that coin just flips heads and you're able to move on to round 2 before getting beaten by probably a 1 or 2 seed.
Yeah. My actual projection for them is pretty much exactly what you just said. I think they're going to be this team feels to me like if Coach Willard has a great season and does what he is capable of doing, that this team could find themselves on the bubble, squarely on the bubble when the season rolls or when the tournament rolls around. They're an 11 seed, they get a play-in game, they win the play-in game. Maybe they give a 6 seed some serious help and end up losing in the first round. Like that feels like a pretty reasonable outcome for this team. And I think if you're Villanova, I think you feel okay about that. Obviously, the expectations for this program remain higher than that, but circumstantially with a new coach and a pretty new look roster and an already early season injury, I think you feel okay if you just get into the dance and you start, restart the streak of making the big dance every single year. But I would be surprised if they end up much higher than that. But I could definitely see this Villanova team breaking the streak and getting back into the tournament.
If this Villanova team makes a tournament, I'd be ecstatic if I'm a Villanova fan. This season is really about kind of bridging the gap. Like Lindsay's a sophomore, Caden's a freshman, Hodge is a freshman. Like these guys are young, and these are even Chris Jeffrey, a guy I really like. That's another freshman. These are guys that are very young that you are hoping are a part of that vision for the program down the line. Malachi Palmer as well, another sophomore. This is a very young team that if this team is ready to compete for the tournament, that is a real upside case. I'd be very happy if I'm a Villanova fan, because then you go into next offseason and it's like, okay, here's what we have. We believe what we have. We had 1 or 2 pieces to this team. And crap, we could be competing like really atop the Big East that next year. If this team makes the tournament, I'm a Villanova fan, I'd be very happy. I'd say the median outcome is you're like 7th, 8th in the league, probably closer to 7th. Just you have some moments of like those games, like you see the flash from Acaden, you see the flash from Matt Hodge of like, damn, when these guys are like sophomores, juniors, it's like, yeah, we're going to be quite good, but they just don't fully have it yet. And they're learning through, and they make some mistakes in some close games later in the season, just because that's going to happen. And they lose some of those close games, but like you see the vision of like, okay, I see what Willard's building here. And then you get those 1 or 2 pieces and it's like, all right, it's time to make the next step and be a team that is pretty comfortably in the tournament come March.
Thanks again, folks, for listening to the show. That is Michael DeRosa here from Road to the Garden talking Villanova basketball. That is going to wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. We got a couple more team previews for you this week, and then Isaac and I will be back with you all on Friday to do our Big Ten conference preview, as we're getting into a weekend full of exhibition games that we're going to be able to recap next week. I cannot wait to have some real basketball to talk about very, very soon. As always, though, we do want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the McBruins. And folks, until next time, peace out.